with you all of what has been happening at the state. And so this session will be recorded and we will be posting this online on our YouTube, as well as sending this out to all of you after today's event. So a little bit more about their Miami Housing Rights. You can see our policy platform online at our website, miamihomes4all.org. And so you can see all the things that our members, again, these are advocates, service providers, resident leaders, and so on, developers, what they are prioritizing. And so, we meet monthly as a coalition. And again, we also do events where we talk through these important issues. And so with that said, I'll pass it over to Rayna from our team to talk through our introductions and some ground rules.
Thank you, Audrey. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Rayna. I'm the Director of Housing Advocacy and Community Engagement at Miami Homes for All. And we are super, super excited for you all to be here today and for Kody to be here from Florida Housing Coalition. So if you all could put in the chat, please introduce yourself, your name, affiliation, and why you are all here today. We're going to get started and we're going to talk about some ground rules. Audrey, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So a little bit of the ground rules today is going to be very standard. We really want to make sure that this, is a smooth and respectful, engaging time while we are meeting today. So we ask that you mute when you are not speaking. Make sure that the button is on mute, and use the chat to ask some questions. Kody is very, very flexible. He told me that he does not want to talk to you all, just talk at you all for 1 hour. So he really, really would love some questions. So while Kody will be speaking, Audrey and I will be monitoring the chat, and we'll make sure if there is a really important question or a question that, could help the conversation, we will definitely scan for it, and then we'll ask Kody, make sure that he's able to answer that. We really, as we said, we really want to make sure that we know the people that are in the room. So on the Zoom, if you all could switch your name to your the Zoom to your name and organization, just so we have a better idea. And we would love to have everybody's camera on, but we understand that sometimes maybe that's not possible, but we would love that for more engagement. If you're all having any kind of technical support or technical issues, please let us know and we'll be more than happy to help you. And then lastly, like Audrey said, this meeting is being recorded, so feel free to turn off your video if you prefer not to be on camera. With that being said, that is all. Kody, it's up to you. Take it away when you're ready.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kody Glazer. I'm the Chief Legal and Policy Officer of the Florida Housing Coalition. And it's always great to be with Miami Homes for All. Y'all do incredible work down there in Miami-Dade. From my perch up here in Tallahassee, don't get to make it down there that much, but I know y'all do some great work. So let me real quick just share my screen here if y'all can see that. And so today, what basically I'm going to cover is everything that happened in Tallahassee this year related to housing policy. As many of you probably know, this was a very long session, went about 102 days, which was about a month and a half beyond when it should have ended. And there was a lot of divisiveness this year, I would say, between the House and Senate and the governor's office. Fortunately, housing policy wasn't really caught up in the divisiveness. I think it was a very successful year for affordable housing funding in particular at the legislature. But I'm going to go through mainly focus on the bills that passed, just so folks are aware of the things that are law now or will be funded, with just some brief conversation about the bills that did not pass, that I do expect to be back next year. And as Rayna mentioned, not a fan of I don't want to talk at y'all for a while. So if folks have any questions, feel free to stop me, put a thing in the chat. Just let me know. We can riff on some of things that happened in Tallahassee for this legislative session. So real quick, just for folks who may not be familiar with the work of the Florida Housing Coalition, we are a statewide nonprofit. We have folks who are situated throughout the state of Florida. We primarily are a nonprofit consultant on various affordable housing programs, working with nonprofit developers and local governments on housing policy. And then we also have a small team, which I lead up, that is focused more so on the policy advocacy and research side of things. So a lot of my time is state level advocacy, working with the legislature to get our Sadowski Housing Trust funds fully funded and other smart pro housing policies as well. But if you're interested in more of what we do, happy to talk about that. So let's get right to it. What happened this session? So there is, I guess I'll start by saying there's a lot of, I think, really positive momentum in Tallahassee these days on affordable housing policy. And that is a big reason for that is just comparing to where we were just 3 or 4 years ago. I like to think of things as basically the pre-live local era and the post-live local era for state housing policy, right? So before 2023, when the Live Local Act was passed, we had to like beg and plead and scream just for the legislature to care about affordable housing and to do anything about housing policy in Florida. Now, when Live Local was passed, and since then, there is a really positive change that I've seen at the Capitol of more senators, more reps being interested in not just fully funding our affordable housing programs, but also passing substantive policy bills as well that aim to get more housing built in the state of Florida that is affordable. So some of the main issues that came up this session, there were some Live Local amendments that I'll touch on briefly. There's a lot in the way of affordable housing funding that I'll break down. A bill that did not pass but will come back related to accessory dwelling units. One thing that I'll spend a little bit of extra time on today is the fourth thing there, which is that Florida has a brand new exciting law that is basically unlocks faith-based land for housing, which I'll break down. And then a whole bunch of other things as well. Fortunately, some of the more not so good things related to housing, like there was a proposal for a while to basically ratchet down the work of community redevelopment agencies. Bills like that did not pass. Some bills related to rural housing did not pass. But overall, it was a very, very, I think, a successful session for affordable housing in Florida. So first, I want to talk about is funding. So a lot of the work that I do at the coalition is primarily focused on our Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Funds. They've been around in Florida since the early 1990s. They are genuinely a national model for how a legislature can fund affordable housing initiatives. And so basically from about 2001 to 2021, we were in what we call the Stop the Sweeps era, where basically the legislature diverted over $2 billion over a period of 20 years, diverted funds collected for housing, and diverted them to other things. This year, very happy to share that for the fifth year in a row, the legislature has fully funded our core Sadowski Trust Fund programs, which is the SAIL program, which is our state's affordable rental housing program, and the CHIP program, where the state sends out housing money to 123 local governments statewide for local housing initiatives. So for the fifth year in a row, CHIP and SAIL are fully funded, which is just incredible if you compare to where we were just 5 years ago. Other areas that were funded, going down the list, is this innovative SAIL program. So in the Live Local, and this one has a caveat because there was some not so great news about this program. So in the Live Local Act, one of the things that act did was create a brand new program that's very similar to the SAIL program, which is, again, our state's affordable rental housing program. And in Live Local, the Live Local Act created this new innovative SAIL program and promised to fund it each and every year at $150 million. And so the promise in Live Local was fund this program every year, $150 million until the year 2033. Well, this year, the legislature pulled back on that future funding commitment. And so what we had this year was the legislature still funded this program at $150 million, but they used general revenue and repealed the part of the program that makes it automatically funded each and every year. So moving forward, housing advocates who are interested in getting that $150 million pot of money for the innovative SAIL program are going to have to go back and advocate for funding this program each and every year, since it will not be automatic moving forward. You also see there the Hometown Heroes program was funded at $50 million. That's one of our state's down payment and closing cost assistance program for persons who are full-time employees of Florida-based businesses. There was some language in the budget that for this upcoming fiscal year, if you yourself have tried to access this program or have people you work with that do, the eligible occupations for this program were limited quite a bit. So just take a look, see if you're like a nurse or different public safety workers or veterans. They definitely pulled back on the occupations that you have to be eligible for that program. Other big item in the budget was the My Safe Florida Home program. This is a very successful program statewide. Basically, it's aimed at giving homeowners providing inspections and grants to help mitigate harm that could be caused by future storms. Basically, it's a hurricane hardening program. The legislature funded it at $280 million, which was up from last year. And the program was also amended so that this program is just for households that earn at or below 120% AMI. Before this year, this program was eligible to whoever, but with some priorities. Basically, first dibs went to low-income families, elderly, things like that. Now this program is completely just for households at or below 120% AMI. So overall, the budget had over $880 million in it for affordable housing program, which is just tremendous versus what we had just a few years ago. And so moving forward, we will still continue to advocate for full funding of Sadowski, advocate for funding things like Innovative Sale, Hometown Heroes, My Safe Florida, but overall just very positive news on the funding front. So what does that mean for Miami-Dade County? So for SHIP, again, so the way that SHIP works is you have your main pot of money, which is about $163 million. That gets sent out to all 67 counties based on population. And then, so each county has its own basically bucket of funding for its county. And then the cities within that county will split the county's bucket of money. So Miami-Dade County for this upcoming fiscal year is set to receive about $12.5 million from SHIP, which is divided amongst 7 different jurisdictions in the county that are all SHIP jurisdictions. And so congrats to Homestead. Homestead is now a SHIP jurisdiction. It's the newest one. So if you work in Homestead, new SHIP program that can be used for local housing initiatives. And so a lot of these slides, I just have them as resources because they have a lot of like text on them, and I don't want anyone to be reading right now. But so basically, this is just some more information about the innovative sale program, the fact that it is, yeah.
Before you go into sale real quick, for some of us who may not be super experts in what SHIP is, could you just briefly explain SHIP and some of the programs of like what this funding will go towards in these jurisdictions? So,
100%.
like, are
Thank you
these
for
going to housing authorities, and what does that look like?
Thank you for asking that great question. So SHIP is a locally run program that has to meet certain like statutory requirements. And so predominantly the SHIP program, first of all, goes to local housing departments. And some of them may partner with nonprofits, their housing authorities, housing finance agencies to administer the funds, but the money goes to the local government's housing department essentially directly. And from there, they have flexibility to use these dollars for various housing things. It can be used for things like down payment assistance, closing cost assistance. It's used pretty predominantly for owner-occupied rehab, so helping folks, fix their house, fix their roofs, make it for elderly folks. It's great for updating their houses to be more livable. So it can be used for ownership, rental housing, new development, impact fees. It's very, very flexible in terms of what local governments can and cannot do with these dollars. So if you are interested in how this program works, each city or county that receives SHIP dollars has what's called a local housing assistance plan, or LHAP, where they will list out all of the things that they plan to use their money on. It's very easily findable online. So that can be a great advocacy tool if you're wanting to know, like, okay, well, my county's getting $7.7 million. Like, what are they using it on? That is all pretty transparent online.
Thank you.
Delightful. So for innovative sale, we'll mention again, the program is no longer going to be automatically funded each and every year. So advocates will still have to lobby for this program to be funded. But so far, in the 2 years since this innovative sale program was launched in 2023, almost 6,000 new affordable rental homes have been assisted statewide. And about 80% of all those units are serving low-income households. So we have a lot of data here just to show about, how many units are at various income levels to basically show that this program is successful. It is a loan program, so this is supposed to be evergreen, recycled to serve more homes in the future. But almost 6,000 homes with the predominant amount of them being used to serve households at or below 80% AMI.
Kody, just the same way for SHIP, can you explain a little bit about what the sale program does for folks
Yeah,
who don't know?
Absolutely, yeah. So SAIL is our state's affordable rental housing program. So this program is administered by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So each and every year they have what are called RFAs, which are basically requests for applications. And they have a bunch of different types of buckets of money that they will have developers apply for to receive it and then be building affordable rental housing. And so SAIL, the traditional SAIL program, it primarily serves households at or below 60% AMI. So the traditional SAIL program has always served very low income households when it comes to preserving and building affordable rental homes. What the innovative SAIL program is, and this is the one that created in Live Local, it's the same framework. So it's still administered by Florida Housing Finance Corporation, except this program can serve households up to 120% AMI instead of just up to 60% AMI, and can be used for a more narrow list of things. So this program has been used to serve urban infill projects, mixed-use developments, developments that use publicly owned land to build housing on. So there's the SAIL program, which is just our traditional program, innovative SAIL. Both are very similar. They just can do different construction things and serve different AMIs in those programs.
Thank you.
Perfect. So those are the things that passed. Great news for funding overall. The one thing that did not pass this session, but we do expect to come back next year, is something that was called the Rural Renaissance. So Senate President Albritton, his main legislative priority was rural renaissance, and which was enacted or was proposed through Senate Bill 110. And how this affects housing is that this bill, if it had passed, would have increased the amount that small rural counties receive in SHIP funding. This bill would have increased so basically right now the minimum is every county gets at least $350,000 a year. This bill would have increased that to $1 million a year. And so how this affects Miami-Dade is if this bill were to pass, and we do expect it to come back next year, by basically lifting up the bottom and giving rural counties more funding, the SHIP program has to take money from those who receive more than $1 million. So if this bill passes next year, Miami-Dade County will receive a little bit less in SHIP dollars moving forward. So we're going to be advocating to just get more funding for SHIP overall, so that larger counties aren't as negatively affected by potentially uplifting the more rural counties with SHIP. So something to just keep on your radars for next session. So that's the funding side of things. I guess I'll pause real quick, Rayna, if there's any questions about funding for this past session. Alrighty. Hearing none. So I'll move on to the second big thing that happened this session, which deals with property taxes. So I don't know, I'm sure many of you all have seen various news articles in the past couple months, but there is a lot of different ideas swirling around property tax reform for the 2026 legislative session. There have been proposals to, repeal property taxes altogether for properties that are homesteaded. There have been other proposals to just provide more exemptions for homesteaded properties. And so overall, I do expect 2026 to be a very big year for property tax policies, which I'll get into in a second. But for this year, we had our legislative tax package. Each year, the legislature will do a budget, and they'll do basically a tax package with all of its tax cuts and various tax-related things. And this year, we got two brand new property tax exemptions for affordable housing development. So I'm not going to go into the weeds of like how these work, but basically what you need to know is that these two new exemptions are for affordable housing that is built on land owned by governmental entities. So let's say that you are working with Miami-Dade County and they own land. Under the second exemption on the screen here, if the county owns land and they basically lease it to you as a developer to build more than 70 affordable housing units, these exemptions basically provide a property tax exemption to those affordable homes that are built on government-owned land. So could be a great way to encourage more partnerships with the state government, with different state agencies, local agencies who have land who build affordable housing on their land now that we have these two brand new property tax exemptions to basically facilitate and encourage development on these types of properties.
Kody, does this include school board owned land?
Yes. So under the second one there, the exemption for, so the first exemption is for land that's owned by the state of Florida. And then the second one is for land owned by basically any governmental entity. And the definition of governmental entity is pretty broad, and it would include school boards.
So this potentially preempts any uh, local policies existing here in Miami-Dade when it comes to like school board or other government-owned land.
I don't know about preempting. So, right, like under the way that Florida law works is that local governments can't do their own property tax exemptions unless the state expressly allows it. So basically, with the way the property taxes work in Florida, it's the opposite of home rule. So I see these exemptions as not necessarily preempting what local governments can do in this space because they never really had authority to do anything in the first place. This is just if a county wanted to use its land for housing, this would allow the builder to receive a property tax exemption on land that is, given to them or leased to them by a governmental entity.
So, thank you.
Great question. And these next things vary in the weeds. If you've been following along with the live local exemptions, the tax package also amended three existing property tax exemptions for affordable housing. The first issue is very in the weeds. It's about basically wouldn't affect Miami-Dade County, but there was an exemption from live local. It basically provides property tax exemptions to developments that have 71 or more affordable rental units for households at or below 120% AMI. And last year, the legislature passed an opt-out provision that allowed certain taxing authorities to opt out of one of the property tax exemptions under that pool. And so basically there was like a very, niche technical thing, basically clearing up that if you are a property and you have received what is called the missing middle property tax exemption, and your taxing authority for some reason opts out of it in future years, that property itself is going to be grandfathered into the program. So if I build a development, I get the property tax exemption, and my taxing authority opts out of it in a future year, I can still get the exemption even if the county or city, whoever, opts out down the line. These bills also amended and expanded some existing property tax exemptions to land owned by HFAs. So now if you have a HFA owns land, that land is leased to provide affordable housing, the land will be exempt from property taxes. So very in the weed stuff if you're interested, but a couple amendments to property tax policy in Florida law. So as I mentioned, 2026 is going to be a big year for property taxes in Florida. And so one of the other aspects of the tax package I think is going to affect housing affordability in some respects moving forward is the tax package directed the Office of Economic and Demographic Research, which is one of the state's sort of policy research data centers, essentially, directed that office to analyze the potential of eliminating or significantly reducing property taxes on homesteaded property. And so this office, by November of this year, is supposed to release what is going to be an incredibly comprehensive study on what reducing or eliminating property taxes for homesteaded properties would look like. And so the study has to have a bunch of findings, a bunch of data, and policy options to do this. So I really see this, I'm very intrigued by what this office comes out with by November, because this could really set the stage for what the legislature does next year. And it will set the stage for what we see on our 2026 ballots in November of next year when it comes to property taxes. And so another aspect of this, yeah.
Do you mind going through like this study just a little bit more? Because I know that, we have quite a few programs here in Miami-Dade that are funded by property taxes, right? And so I know that this was quite alarming for many folks here, especially in this room. And maybe folks are being a little shy right now, which is okay. But Kody, can you just walk us through like what is, how this study will be conducted and as I'm seeing here, a series of findings and policy options. But what does that mean? Like, how will the study be conducted? Are they surveying residents? Are they going to reach out to um, municipalities and programs that, so for example, I'm thinking, just like all the different programs that exist because of property taxes. And so just curious, like what this process will look like. And maybe I'm jumping the gun here because I saw that you have another slide on it. But
No,
just
yeah.
curious, like if you could just explain a bit further.
Yeah, actually trying to pull up the bill. So like the bill is, and I just kind of abridged it for now. Let's see real quick. Great. So I just put in the chat like the bill itself. And so like
Awesome.
there is a lot of specifics in the bill about exactly what this office is supposed to do. And so for example, I'm just going to read part of the bill. It's supposed to look at the effect of things like Save Our Homes on homeowners' property taxes. It's supposed to look at the potential impacts on public services. So that's supposed to be part of this is, if we drastically reduce property taxes for certain properties, how does that affect services, police, safety, education, all that stuff? They're supposed to look at that. And basically, the office has like a $1 million budget essentially to contract with whoever to make this study happen. But yeah, if you look at that, there's like 100 lines of what they're supposed to look at, and I think it's going to be very intriguing to see what they come up with.
Thank you,
And I
Kody.
think
And I see that Alex has his hand up. Go ahead, Alex.
Kody, just really quickly, refresh my memory. Was through this bill, was the I think there was like a board or something that was also supposed to study this in tandem. I think Representative Vicky Lopez sits on this board to look at property taxes. Was that in relation to this bill? That's my question.
Separate things. So great. That's actually next slide. So this was so the House. You have this report that this office is going to do, which is one thing. And then on the other side of things, I'll just go to the next slide, is that the Speaker of the House has convened a select committee on property taxes. And so this committee, which Alex, and thanks for bringing that up, it's tasked with looking at 5 specific things to start. So for example, the first one's a big one, right? It's basically looking at whether they should make a bill that says that, every local government has to hold a referendum on eliminating property taxes. They're going to be looking at what's the feasibility of doing a $500,000 homestead exemption, which basically would mean that if your home is valued at 500 grand or less, you basically would be paying nothing in property taxes for non-school property taxes. The third one's pretty big too. So right now, like every time we want to do anything with like homestead exemptions or property taxes, you almost have to do a constitutional amendment and like have a ballot every 2 years, which I'm sure many of you have voted on many times in your lives. One of the proposals is to basically, instead of us having to go do a constitutional thing every 2 years, giving the legislature the full authority to do homestead exemptions. Number 4 is about basically making the Save Our Homes caps that we have more favorable to existing homeowners, and also banning the government from foreclosing for unpaid taxes. So there's a lot on their plate. They've already met, I think, at least once. I don't know if they met a second time. But as committee weeks start to happen again in October, I expect this committee to meet and discuss these things, and we'll see what happens.
Who's on this committee? Kody, is there a list available that folks can just quickly see?
Yeah, so I can, if you just Google the Select Committee on Property Taxes, it should come right up. But the way that it works is, because it is a select committee of a body of the legislature, there is like a equal split between Republicans and Democrats. So it's primarily Republican based, but there's still some Democrats on there, and you can see there's like 30 something people maybe on it. I could be getting that wrong, but you can see a list if you just Google the House Select Committee. I can put a link into the chat when we have a second. But yes, Rep. Lopez is one of the co-chairs of this committee.
It looks like Alex and Daniela just put in the chat for us. Thanks, Kody.
Thanks for the assist. So big deal. The property taxes funds a lot of services. I think I've already seen some messaging around, if we reduce property taxes, we're defunding the police and like using the crime and safety argument to try to stop things like this. And, we'll see what sticks and what works and what we're going to actually see next session. But from a housing perspective, one thing that I am particularly interested in is if we give all these property tax exemptions to homesteaded properties, how does that affect everybody else? primarily renters, right? Renters do not have the benefit of having a homestead exemption. And so I'm very interested to see that if, homestead taxes are cut dramatically, how local governments are going to shift costs elsewhere. And they might charge higher impact fees, they might charge more for services, they might raise property taxes a lot on multifamily rental housing. And so definitely interested in looking more into that. Here's some things of policies that we're interested in exploring at the Florida Housing Coalition, that are less just straight up repealing property taxes, but could provide a lot of help to more of our low income seniors that really could use a property tax break, especially for folks on fixed incomes and things like that.
Thank you, Kody.
Any more? I think it's the last property tax slide I have. If anyone has any thoughts on property taxes?
Well, it seems like Nick had something in the chat. He said that the tax exemption on commercial leases is a long-term challenge for transit funding in Miami-Dade, and the rough estimate so far is $75 million in lost funds annually.
Right.
So just
Cody, is there an appetite for a focus on property insurance? I know that it seems like the state is very curious about property taxes, but have you heard of folks being curious about or thinking through property insurance discounts? We've seen other states kind of like pursue programs like Fortified, for example, or other discount programs. So just curious, like, have there been any discussion about anything like that?
My sense of it, and I'm not an insurance expert by any means, is that basically the big reforms that they did a couple of years ago, I think there's a sentiment of just kind of waiting to see how those play out before they come back again and do some drastic reforms. But I think the Fortified idea is a great one. As you mentioned, there are other states, I think Alabama and Louisiana and others, that will actually require insurance companies to reduce premiums if homes are built to certain standards like Fortified. So definitely interested in seeing things like that. But that insurance, frankly, isn't much on my radar for session things like this because I'm not an expert in it. But I'm sure other folks have been following those and could give a better answer.
Okay, thanks, Cody.
Wonderful. So now to the fun stuff, if you're not already having fun. So the housing world has a lot of great acronyms, a lot of fun ones. This one has got to be up there. You're going to be hearing at least me and the coalition say this acronym a lot over the next several months to maybe years, which is YIGBY, which stands for Yes in God's Backyard, a nice play on NIMBY. And basically, this is a huge victory, I think, for housing advocates. And so this was part of Senate Bill 1730, which was sponsored by Senator Claude, but also championed greatly by Representative Vicky Lopez, who's been a tremendous housing champion down there in Miami-Dade. And so what this YIGBY provision does is it essentially helps unlock a lot of faith-based land to be more readily used to build affordable housing. And so basically how this tool works is, so let's say that you are a religious institution of some kind, and you have land that is basically next to a house of public worship. And let's say that you wanted to build affordable housing on the land that you owned. Let's say you wanted to build like a multifamily development of like 10 or 15 units, right? A lot of the times, the local zoning codes won't necessarily let you build affordable housing on that kind of land. Sometimes religious owned land is zoned institutionally, might be zoned for maybe just like one single family home at a time. And so if you were a faith-based group and you wanted to build housing on your property, you might have to go through a months-long or years-long intensive process to get a rezoning or a comprehensive plan amendment to be able to build housing on that faith-based land. And so what YIGBY does is it gives local governments the option, as opposed to Live Local, which was mandatory. It gives local governments the option to basically fast-track affordable housing permitting on faith-based land. So if you have land that is owned by a religious institution that contains a house of public worship, or is basically next to a parcel with a house of worship, localities have the discretion, they have the option to use this tool. And so this is very exciting. I think it's going to be a really great rallying cry for a lot of coalition building around building homes. And so ultimately, we estimate that over 30,000 parcels in the state would be eligible under this tool. And really, because it's an optional law, it is up to localities to actually use it. So a lot of advocacy is still needed at the local level, at each local government to actually get them to use this new law. You'll see there is put here the language in bold, underlined, basically saying that notwithstanding any other law, anything else, a local government can approve affordable housing on land owned by a religious institution, regardless of the underlying zoning, as long as 10% of the homes are affordable. So there's a lot of work to be done on what I call activating YIGBY. I think this summer, just as much education and outreach as possible is going to be huge, right? Just letting folks know that this is a new tool, her faith-based groups, and then, of course, local advocacy, technical assistance to make sure that folks genuinely use the tool.
Kody, there's a question from Riss saying, were there a lot of barriers to building on faith-based land before this law? I asked because I know that there was a lot of land parcels owned by religious institutions that Guma was looking at using for affordable housing developments a couple of years ago. And then after that, Alex has his hand raised.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it really depends on where you are in the state. I think some communities, especially that has a lot of like religious groups that are already sort of in the urban center or urban core, there it's possible that a lot of the land that could be used for housing is already zoned in the right way to unlock housing potential. But there certainly are some communities in the state that don't necessarily have the zoning codes to facilitate this kind of housing. So, for example, in St. Petersburg, St. Petersburg, before this law was passed, basically had to go through a 2-year long NIMBY fight to let a church build housing on its land. 2 years it took to basically get the community to buy in to approve housing on this land. And with this new tool, they could just do it tomorrow if they wanted to. That's really the value of this. And so it really depends where in the state. And so I see the follow-up question is, does this apply to land next to religious institutions or any land a religious institution owns? So in order for a parcel to be eligible, it has to have a house of public worship on it or be contiguous to one. So it's not just, I just want to make a clear caveat. It's not every parcel owned by a faith-based group. It has to have that house of public worship or be a parcel that is next to it.
Thank you, Kody. It seems like Alex has his hand up, and then we'll go back into the chat. Elizabeth has another question as well.
A quick question, Kody. Would obviously pending the permission of a local government, would this in effect expand Live Local into residential areas? Because Live Local never went into single family. So if there's a faith-based institution in a residential area, local government legislates to allow this, would it in effect expand Live Local into those areas?
Yes. The short answer is yes. This is different provisions. So this is a lot more discretionary. So local governments, for all intents and purposes, to answer your question is yes, but also local governments are going to have some kind of policies, I think, around this of having clear criteria for when they're going to use this tool. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of. So yeah, absolutely. If you have a church, for example, that's in a religious or in a residential neighborhood and they have this vacant land or a vacant parking lot or something, they could use this tool regardless of what the underlying zoning is to get housing built.
Thank you, Kody. We have a couple of questions in the chat. Elizabeth Strom said, does this apply to any land owned by a religious institution or just land with actual houses of worship? Example, religious school property. And this may be a very specific Tampa Bay question, but the Scientologists own a ton of land. Would all of that be eligible? And then we can go to Ariana's question next.
Yeah, so that one is it has to have a house of worship or be next to or be contiguous to one, so basically connected to it. So in some communities that caveat of having a house of worship or contiguous could limit a lot of where this tool can be used. But again, there are some other places in more rural areas, for example, where you might have like a church on one parcel and then the contiguous parcel might be massive and be able to have a lot of homes on it. So it depends on where those houses of public worship are.
Thank you, Kody. Ariana Hernandez said, by the same token, the religious institution can buy land now in a place not zoned for housing and building housing, right? Also, this housing could potentially exclude potential residents from other religions.
So the first question, that's a great question. So with this tool, faith-based groups could buy land and use this tool again, as long as they also have a house of public worship on it. There's that nexus to having that house of worship or being contiguous to that. And so the second question, this is one that I think from an implementation perspective, is one that I am most, I guess, concerned about from it being actualized. Is I think there are a lot of I guess I'm just very concerned that some jurisdictions, some advocates will kind of prioritize certain religions or certain sects over others. And so I think there is going to need to be some kind of clear objective criteria that's not based on what kind of religion you're a part of. Because like it would be awful if like a county were to use this tool for a church and like not a synagogue or something, for example. So I think a lot of objective criteria are going to be needed. And yes, your point, yeah, there is an exception in the Fair Housing Act. It basically says that if you are a religious group and you build housing, you are allowed to discriminate to basically allow people in your religion to occupy the housing as long as the membership of your religion or sect or whatever doesn't exclude on the basis of some other protected class. So as long as you're not saying that my church can only have white people, you can basically discriminate on the basis of people being in your religion if you build housing on faith-based land. So there's a lot of caveats there with fair housing exceptions. Hopefully, potentially something that local governments could do is to say, like, if we use this tool, you have to basically waive that exception to the Fair Housing Act. You have to have it be open to everybody. That's something that local governments could do. But that's all going to be spelled out, I think, when folks really implement this at the local level.
Thank you, Kody. And I have a question that I have for you is I know this can unlock over 30,000 parcels statewide. Do you know what the number could potentially be for Miami-Dade County itself?
Yeah, so we did some analysis as this bill was trending. So we looked at all land in the state by county, and it's kind of this is all just estimates with just state level data. And so basically Miami-Dade, according to what we looked at, Miami-Dade, and I think that's Hillsborough and up there in the Panhandle, has a lot of land that could be eligible for this tool. So there's some data on, and I can share a more in-depth sort of methodology if folks are interested. But you can see like by county and then the total acreage by county. Looks like Miami-Dade and whatever county that is 3 above Miami-Dade are pretty big hotspots for where this tool could be used.
Awesome. Thank you, Kody. Any other questions? Okay.
Fantastic. So YIGBY, great to see that in action. So a couple other things here, and thanks for the great question on that. Live Local. So this is the 3rd year of the Live Local era, and the 3rd time that we have a bill, or I guess the 2nd time we have a bill amending parts of the Live Local Act. So this one's more in the weeds if you've been following this tool, so probably more relevant to you. But also in Senate Bill 1730, the legislature amended the Live Local land use mandate for affordable housing in commercial, industrial, and mixed-use areas. So a lot of, again, nuanced things that was in this bill. I think the big ones to kind of keep your eye on is that for the first time, the bill actually defines what commercial, industrial, and mixed use means, because there's been a lot of local, arguments or debates between localities and developers on which parcels can be eligible. So the bill finally defines what those uses are. The big thing, I don't know actually how much this applies to Miami-Dade, the bill finally addresses the PUD issue. And so what is the PUD issue? So planned unit developments is a zoning thing where basically local governments can negotiate different development zoning standards through a flexible zoning category called like a planned unit development or planned development. And in many jurisdictions across the state do this. One of the main issues with Live Local is that most jurisdictions have basically come out and said, we are not going to apply this Live Local tool to land that's within a flexible zoning category, like a PUD or PD. SB 1730 just ends that debate and basically says that, yes, if you have a parcel that allows for commercial, industrial, mixed uses within a PUD or PD, that parcel is eligible for Live Local. Local governments can no longer kind of put roadblocks to using Live Local in those types of zoning districts. A couple other things here as well I think are interesting. The last one, there's zoning entitlements. Basically, what this bill does is it prevents jurisdictions from basically downzoning or having lower densities or lower heights just to avoid Live Local. Developers are entitled to the highest currently allowed heights, densities, FARs as of 2023. So if next year, for example, you have a city that just downzones everything, lowers density, lowers heights, Live Local can go by the highest allowed as of 2023 to kind of avoid that situation from happening. There's some parking stuff in Senate Bill 1730 as well. The bill requires local governments to reduce parking by 15% if there is some nexus to transit, and then some stuff about new exemptions, civil actions, building moratorium, and then a new annual report that localities will have to submit to the state about how this tool is being used. And so on the Live Local side, and I hope you're happy to answer any questions about this one. Sort of one of the gaps in the state with this new tool is data. As of right now, there is no required reporting about how this tool is being used. So at the Florida Housing Coalition, we've tried to do our best to track where this thing is actually happening. And so we have a dashboard if you want to take a look at it. I guess in a link for folks who are interested. Basically, over half of these Live Local projects in the entire state are in Miami-Dade County. So congrats on that, I guess. A lot are happening down there, and more of like the bigger metros like Orlando and Tampa. But overall, there's about 31,000 homes in the pipeline somewhere with this new tool. I'm happy to share any data if folks are interested.
Thank you, Kody. Any questions around this? Okay.
Great. So the tail end of this little update for y'all, there were some condo reforms, and I'm not a condo expert. I live in Tallahassee. We don't have a lot of those. So folks in the room can probably speak to this bill better than I can. But basically, my understanding is what this bill does is House Bill 913, sponsored by Representative Lopez, is it amends a lot of the requirements that were passed post Surfside related to condos and structural integrity reserve studies, milestone inspections, and just in general, just all the laws that are passed post Surfside were amended to kind of give some more wiggle room to support the reserves that the inspections that you get under these that you're required to do under this law says. So basically, the House Bill 913 just clarifies, who has to do a structural integrity reserve study, extends some deadlines at the end of this year, allows condo associations to use reserves, to do lines of credit, to help pay for reserves, and a whole lot more. So again, if folks are interested in these condo reforms, here's some bullets on what it does. It was like over 100-something page bill, and maybe someone else can speak more directly to this, but a lot of stuff to follow there. And the last couple things I got here, Senate Bill 180 was very important. This bill it was an emergency management bill, had a lot of stuff in it about pre and post disaster permitting plans, things like that. And sort of the biggest one that I have a lot of questions about is the second bullet there, which is basically this bill says that local governments who were listed in a disaster declaration for hurricanes Debbie, Helene, or Milton, which is basically the entire state. So basically all local governments are prohibited from adopting more restrictive or burdensome land use regulations until October of 2027. This has a lot of planners and myself and a lot of folks in the housing world kind of questioning what this is going to do. Because this language about, there's no clear guidance on what more restrictive or burdensome means. Does that affect sort of climate resiliency land use tools? Does it affect just building code in general? What does that mean to be more restrictive or burdensome? We don't know. And so we will see how that plays in practice, but something to certainly follow for folks in Miami-Dade.
What could be the implications of all of this, Kody? I know you're saying land use, but I guess for layman terms, what could be the repercussions of this?
Yeah, so it basically gives a cause of action to a developer. So if let's say a local government wanted to I don't know, require that you don't have residential on the ground floor to, prevent flooding from inundating homes. A developer could try to claim that, like, if that wasn't already in place as of last year, they could claim that requiring, no residential bottom floor could be like a more restrictive or burdensome regulation and kind of prevent a locality from doing that. So there's a lot of kind of like a lot of hypotheticals you can throw out there. I saw an article about it was like I think it was Lakeland who wanted to like pass an ordinance about the number of roosters that a property owner could have. And they didn't pass that ordinance because that would technically be more burdensome if you're limiting the number of roosters on your property. Just a fun example, but it could be just any land use regulation that just makes it more burdensome and that's not clearly defined to a developer. They could challenge that provision. And a lot of folks have called for a veto of this bill. I don't think it's been signed yet. Maybe it has. But yeah.
Thank you, Kody.
And speed. I'm going to speed through these last couple ones. My Safe Florida, as I mentioned before, amended the program. So now this program, which provides inspections and grants for hurricane hardening, is now just for households earning at or below 120% AMI. Also, the My Safe Florida condominium program, which does the same thing for condo buildings in terms of inspections and hardening in the event of a hurricane. That bill, House Bill 393, amends the program slightly to talk about what percentage of owners you need to consent to receiving the grant. Have some language about matching dollar for dollar the funding that the state provides, and also some language about the fact that grants will only be awarded if some kind of improvement actually results in some kind of mitigation credit, discount, or other rate differential when it comes to insurance. So a lot there if you were interested in that program. And perfect timing, because I see a question in the chat just about this bill. So those are the bills that passed. So largely it's the full funding of Sadowski for the 5th year in a row. We got Live Local bill, we got YIGBY, and here's another one that just did not pass that I do expect to come back next year. So Senate Bill 184, this bill would have required every local government in the state of Florida to allow accessory dwelling units everywhere they allow single family homes. So it would have been basically, when we look at it, it would have legalized ADUs in every single family district statewide. And we estimated that this bill could have led to between 32,000 and 58,000 new ADUs to be built over the next 10 years. However, on the very last day of session, this bill died. And this bill died, to Liz's question in the chat, over concerns about ADUs being used as short-term rentals. So on the Senate side, the Senate bill would have allowed local governments to prohibit ADUs from being used as short-term rentals. And the House did not want to go with that. And that is literally why this bill died in the last days of session. So over the summer, well, as I do expect this bill to come back, we're going to be trying to do some data gathering on ADUs and short-term rentals, right? Is this issue real? What does the data support? How, in terms of like places that allow ADUs pretty liberally, what percentage of them actually are used as short-term rentals? How many of them are used for family members or rental housing? Not a lot of good data about that, frankly, in Florida. So we hope to compile some of that to inform this debate, but expect that to come back next year.
We have a question by Alex. Do we know if Airbnb was lobbying on the ADUs? If so, would they try to do that again?
I would expect they were lobbying. I don't know for sure, but I would not be surprised one bit if that was one of the reasons why the House pushed back. But I would expect this. I would expect either if this bill is going to pass, I think it just has to not have short-term rental stuff in there. That's kind of the third rail of Florida politics is short-term rentals, and the last 10 or so years has been a testament to all that they've tried to do with local short-term rental regulations. So I think for this bill to pass, it's probably going to have none of it. But no, could be surprised. They could have some negotiation, some middle ground, but we'll see.
Kody, I was going to say if there's and great question, Alex, because if that's the case, if they were lobbying around it, would they be able to also help like rally up some of the data around short-term rentals and things of ADUs? So
Definitely.
And thanks to Liz for putting a study from Seattle in the chat. And I think in Miami-Dade, in unincorporated Miami-Dade, ADUs are legalized, and it actually is helping to promote. The county is actually doing a really great program for pre-approved permits. There's like a blueprint program for ADUs, and it's actually pretty exciting to see homeowners, create more, being able to do some wealth building in our community, as well as promoting like being able to age in place, right? We're seeing more and more seniors experiencing housing instability, and so this is an opportunity for the local community to do that. But it's super interesting. I mean, I guess Kody, I think you have a couple more slides, and I know we're over time, but just quick question. And what are some next steps or ideas for us to do here in Miami-Dade in engaging elected officials on whether it's ADUs or other bills that we have 15 minutes left. Never mind. I'm totally lying, Kody. Um, so just out of curiosity, like what are some suggestions that you have for us here in Miami-Dade? I know you probably have some slides left, but just curious, like how can we activate ourselves in this?
I think y'all are arguably the most powerful people in the state of Florida because y'all have the House Speaker and you have the senator and representative that are basically the like stewards for all of the housing bills that move. Speaker Perez, Rep Lopez, Senator Claudiud, they're all in your backyard and they're all the housing bill people. So I think you're in a great position to meet locally with them, to talk about how some of these state policies can really improve people's lives in Miami-Dade. I think that is a tremendous boon that you all have just being in Miami-Dade. But when it comes to like what policies to advocate for, I mean, there's just so much that can be done at the state level. And I think the rest of this decade is going to be just a continued discussion of what the role of state housing policy is when it comes to affordability and what to still leave to local governments to regulate on their own. So the state, for example, they have a lot of money in their budget, and we always continue to support, fully funding Sadowski, always continue to support just other programs that can support housing affordability throughout the state, whether it be new construction, preservation, helping people pay for insurance. Like the state has the money to do it. It's a matter of priorities. Something that I've always been interested in and seeing if we can get in the state level is finding ways to get infrastructure dollars conditioned on housing. So for example, like if the Department of Transportation like gives a city X millions of dollars to build a road, I think that should come with some strings of, hey, if you're building that road with state money, you got to make sure that the land around that new road is able to have multifamily affordable housing, period. So there's a lot of work to be done there. A lot of work about like on land use reforms, right? Like I know Miami-Dade has been really great on a number of things with like ADUs and using public land for housing and local housing trust funds. But how can we expand that statewide and just get more folks to legalize ADUs, unlock a lot more housing near transit, and then other just so much that can be done. And sometimes it's hard, I think, from an advocacy perspective to know what to focus on because everything can be a priority. So I think it also works a lot. It's about working in tandem to be like rowing the same boat. I think that's the right phrase. With the same stream of just like what to be advocating for because there's just so much in the housing world that can be done. But I really encourage that at least for the rest of this decade, we continue to kind of chip away at the problem and just see a lot more state policies that can really help people's lives.
Thank you, Kody. Feel free to continue with your slides if you have any more slides, and then we can ask the rest of the time for some questions.
Yeah, I'm done. I can do one little advertising thing.
Sure, yeah,
which is
about your
that
stack.
yeah, so for those of you familiar with the work of the coalition, basically 95% of our work has always been nonprofit consulting, technical assistance, and basically it's been just like me and a few others who are able to spend a lot of our time doing the state level, local level advocacy. So this summer we are launching a brand new initiative at the coalition called the Housing Action Lab, where it's basically just to give us more capacity just to do more in the way of our own direct advocacy, both at the state and local levels, when it comes to just local and state pro housing policy in general. We're going to hopefully do a lot more just data driven research, right? Like trying to tackle the short term rental ADU thing, tackle some of these property tax proposals. Just giving us more space to work on those things is something that I'm launching this summer. And so if folks are interested in getting involved, we do have a Substack that we launched last week. We're able to see some articles on what we're thinking about and kind of where we see the future of housing policy in Florida. We'd love to have all y'all involved, and because y'all do some great work down there in Miami-Dade. And so, yeah, this is the new initiative that we're starting this summer.
Thank you, Kody. And yeah, the
Wonderful.
Substack, I recommend everyone to subscribe. It already has some pretty great things in there. So thank you so much, Kody. Any questions for Kody? We have about 10 minutes left, so now is the time for some questions. We'll take it one by one.
At your upcoming conference in August, will you also be doing a session on this?
Yeah, so at our conference we have put a link in the chat to it. Yeah, so we'll have on Monday afternoon I'll do like a 2 hour just state housing policy event where we'll have a lot of just state advocates in the room to talk about like what's next for 2026. And on Wednesday morning, we're doing a housing action lab session where it's all going to be about local coalition building. We're hoping to have it be very interactive, really basically just having a large room of advocates or like basically put people different parts of the room based on where they work, and talk about their priorities, different strategies, how they get there, and hopefully just encourage some cross-state collaboration on different local housing policy.
Thank you, Kody. It seems like also Alex has his hand raised. Go ahead, Alex.
Kody, on the Miami-Dade County surtax, that has to be renewed. I know other counties like Broward are looking at advocating for that at a state level. Given your work across the state, are there any other counties that are pushing to try to create a surtax legislatively? And what do you think the climate's like to renew or even create surtaxes for other counties?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, folks may not be aware. So, Miami-Dade is special in a lot of respects, and Miami-Dade gets to do a lot of extra local taxes that other parts of the state cannot. One of them is that Miami-Dade County is the only county in the state that can do a surtax on real estate transfers for a local housing efforts. And so, yeah, in years past, there have been other counties that have said, "Hey, we want to do what Miami-Dade County can do too," but to no success. I don't know. I think it depends. I think one thing that I'm always trying to be mindful of is that, if I guess I support as much local flexibility for local revenue as possible for housing, first and foremost. But I think there always has been a concern that if counties can kind of go off and do their own thing, there'll be less support for things like SHIP, like SAIL, that do have a more statewide view. So I don't know what the climate is, honestly, about if that could pass next year, but I know that's one of the reasons why it hasn't in the past has been some concerns about that. And it's an additional tax, and we don't like extra taxes in Florida.
Thank you, Kody. Thank you, Alex, for the question. Any other questions for Kody? That only means that, Kody, your presentation was so thorough that everybody understood everything that you said. So we really appreciate that. Kody has already sent me the slides, so I will be sure to also send you all the slides shortly, in through the email. And we want to say thank you to, first and foremost, Florida Housing Coalition, Kody, for coming up with the slides and really presenting it for Miami-Dade. We really, really appreciate you. We really appreciate everybody that came today and sat here and really grasped all that important information about what happened this session. So our next steps will be that, one, I will obviously send you all the slides, and then once the recording is ready to go, we will also send you all the recording as well as some follow-up next steps. Some of the things that Kody has sent also, recording the Florida Housing Conference that will be happening in August. Miami Homes for All will be there, as well as Kody's Substack, which we all should be able to, you all should be subscribing to, because there's some really, really good stuff in there. Audrey, is there anything else that am I missing that we should share?
We are all good. Thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. Have a wonderful day, everyone. See you all soon.
See you all soon. Thank you, everyone.